All right, y'all. Thanks, everybody. So, I want everyone to think back to ancient times. I'm talking about 2022. Think about the biggest AI developments of that year. We had Copilot and VS Code, ChatGPT, but I'm not talking about those things. I'm talking, of course, about the beautiful couple of weeks when an open source image generator called DALL-E Mini went viral. It immediately had to be renamed to Crayon or Cra-AI-on because it was not an actual OpenAI product. But this is one of my favorite things that I generated during that period. By contrast, this is what DALL-E 3 did with the same prompt this year. I have to say, I kind of hate this DALL-E 3 image. Is it photorealistic or pretty damn close? Yes, I'd say so. Do I feel a stirring of joy in my soul when I see it? I do not. It feels empty. But the original image is pretty much perfect. So OpenAI defines artificial general intelligence as systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. Now, first of all, I want to say that I don't personally think that AGI is a terribly useful term. Much like AI itself, it's more of a marketing term than a technical one. But nevertheless, the part of this quote that's most interesting to me is this idea of economically valuable work. Are these economically valuable? In literal terms, probably not. But I and many others would argue that image models and large language models are having this depressing, flattening effect on culture. Which I guess leads me to my central question today, which is, what if we made language models bad? I decided to focus on language models rather than image models because they feel more familiar to everyday use at this point, and because I personally am more familiar with language and writing. I have an MFA in poetry, and back before I transitioned into tech, I used to work for an author, and I side hustled as a freelance writer. So to get back to that Dolly Parton operating a flamethrower level of language, I decided to fine-tune a small language model on several public domain texts, specifically the 1,000-plus-year-old epic poem Beowulf, a 17th century cookbook, and a book simply called The Story of Crisco. Also, to be clear, I used a translation of Beowulf because the original is in Old English and looks like this. And I wanted to create something weird, but I still did want it to be basically readable by modern English speakers. And if I'm being real, my first attempt at this was pretty hastily and grotesquely vibe-coded. But at a very high level, the process is this. After setting up my environment, I prepared the texts by stripping white space and breaking them into chunks, in this case, recipes and stanzas of poetry. Then I created a training data set with another Python script that basically generates a bunch of sample questions and responses for training. More on that part soon. And finally, run the fine-tuning process. So I used LoRA fine-tuning, which stands for low-rank adaptation. And I'm not going to get into a ton of detail, but basically LoRA injects small trainable weight matrices into specific layers of the model while keeping the base frozen so that you don't have to retrain the entire thing. And it's faster and uses less memory, so it was a better fit for running on the constrained GPU of my laptop. And then I ran the bot in my terminal. So this was a strong start. We've got some Beowulf meat haul action, and then to make small Phoxy comets. What's a Phoxy comet? As far as I can tell, this is an entirely made-up word that did not appear anywhere in my training data, nor that I could Google. So that was a really good start. Then we have actually the same opening phrase, some random numbers get appended, some weird ingredients, and then the phrase, scum them very hard. And then we have another recipe that involves boiling something and then doing something terrible with eggs, which is great. But after a few chats, it started to get kind of boring. It felt formulaic, and there was way more recipe than Beowulf. Also, the story of Crisco seemed largely absent. So I figured I could do better. The first thing I did for V2 was added to the training data a big text file of modern slang, advertising slogans, and inspirational quotes. So I wanted to contrast the older language with some shorter, more modern phrases. And I also respect intellectual property, so I did not want to rip whole poems or articles that didn't belong to me. And shout out to my coworkers, some of whom are here, who helped to contribute to this large text file. But where I spent the most time was creating a more diverse and varied training data set that does a better job of representing the source text and the kind of responses I wanted to see. So if we look at this first method from the original version, we can pretty clearly see why the answers felt so formulaic. We basically have a Beowulf intro, do some light updating of the recipe by replacing some of the words with kennings, which are figurative two-word phrases that are common in Old English poetry like Beowulf, and then we got like a Beowulf-style closing. Then we generate 1,000 examples from this formula for fine-tuning. And you may notice an absence of the story of Crisco, and that's because I processed the raw text, but I never actually included it in the training data, so mystery solved there. And as I approached V2 of Beowulf Stroganoff, I knew I didn't want all of the training data to follow the same formula. So I created 5 categories of responses, and then I changed up the format for each a little bit. I also mapped these to different question types. And I was curious if I could get any adherence from the question and the answer. If you noticed last time, it was basically like a question and a totally unrelated answer that was just a recipe. So I wanted to see if I could get at least a little bit of adherence there. And the thing that I really did most differently when I was working on V2 of this was actually slowed down, paid attention, and spent a lot of time crafting the code with intent, thinking about how I wanted to juxtapose the different text styles and what the best kinds of responses would look like. So then I reran the data set creation, not even the fine-tuning yet, just the big 1,000-line data set. Right off the bat, we got some Crisco, so that's good. And then this one was just like exactly what I was looking for. So I'm just going to read the whole thing. So for the question, how much space is too much space, Beowulf Stroganoff answers, "Mama, you got this. The thanes of old face such trials too. Hasten the hardy one, henchmen with him, sandy strand of the sea and tread, widespread ways, the world's great candle. You got this, Mama. Know this also, you are a saddle of sumptuous design. In summation, I've been a nasty girl." Which also raises the question, is it worth going to the trouble of fine-tuning a model when programmatic randomization is pretty damn good? So let's find out. I reran the fine-tuning process. And right off the bat, we have a question about bread and an answer about bread. And to make bread, you boil water and blood, and then you let it sit for 30 days. You know, bread. Okay, so second response, and I really love this one. It feels kind of like an indirect answer to the question. Beowulf Stroganoff is like, don't worry about how loud your child sings. Get off your phone. Let her sing as loud as she wants. Joy is not meant to be a crumb. And that last line is a quote from a Mary Oliver poem, which was in the training data, but the part about smartphones was not. And then we got mixed fluid meat. We got Crisco, more boiled blood, and then here's some practical coding advice for everybody. So was this better than programmatic randomization? I think so. Not maybe a ton more, because reading a 17th century cookbook is really fun, but it frequently surprised me and was more unpredictable than V1 was for sure. Would I use this for actual poetry that I'm trying to publish? No, I would not. You've probably seen this tweet by now, and I agree with this person. I think that there are all these ways that AI can steal our joy, like making flat, bland art where you don't have to wrestle with every little choice and learn anything. I would never use AI to write a poem. The joy and the work of poetry comes with placing every word with intent. And I saw that a little bit with making V1 of this too. I was able to vibe code it very quickly with a general concept, but I gave up a lot of authorial intent when I did that. And maybe it's useful to just get something done that I could work off of, but all of the creativity and learning really came from slowing down and updating the second version by hand. So let's protect our joy. We're building the future, y'all. It doesn't have to be boring and shitty, but together we can make it bad. Thank you. And here's how you can chat with Beowulf Stroganoff, and it's hosted on the free tier of Hugging Face, so it's slow as fuck. But enjoy that.